If you've been involved in gaming and gaming content for any amount of time, it's almost impossible you haven't heard of Outer Wilds. And that's because The Outer Wilds is an indie game that practically everyone seems to love. A narrative about a sun that goes supernova every 22 minutes, where in that time you must try and discover secrets or unlock hidden passageways throughout the universe, all in a bid to figure out what's going on and how to stop it. And with each failure, you awake again, around the campfire, ready to do it over. But this time, armed with the most potent weapon of all, knowledge. It's a fascinating concept in general, and leads to a lot of interesting gameplay mechanics and moments. But funnily enough, I don't actually adore this game quite as much as many others. I think it's largely in many ways overstated, with too many people exaggerating how good it can be often. Personally, I think it would have benefited a lot more from open-ended design principles, rather than just puzzle pieces you have to fit together. And yet, as I say that, there still is something about this title, an experience it can potentially give us that is unforgettable. And for that reason, I want to make the argument that even if you play it at the wrong period in your life like I did, that even the chance that you play it at the right moment when it will speak to you more closely makes it the type of game everyone should play before they die. Because more than anything, Outer Wilds is an experience rather than a game. A gameplay loop that at first can be frustrating or confusing, but as you slowly piece together everything you need to do, is awe-inspiring in what it does and how cool the true ending is. Without giving any specific story spoilers away, the moment-to-moment in this game essentially comes down to flying from planet to planet trying to make certain things happen. For example, on one planet the entire surface may be covered in a sea full of tornadoes that reach into the sky. Another has its sand being ripped off of its shell to another planet entirely in real time, and some locations even house anomalies, like quantum objects that disappear the second you look away. The genius of this loop comes from that 22-minute timer, because each and every day, actions carry out the same way. That planet that is being stripped of all of its sand, at the same time, has a hidden door in a valley that opens up at the exact same moment over and over. And slowly using this to your advantage to learn more, you can piece by piece figure out how to do more complex things. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a comet that as time goes on moves closer and closer to the sun, which causes its frozen ice to melt, and if you make your way inside during the melting process before it gets too hot outside, you can find something special. Things like this are what the Outer Wilds is all about, but its true crowning achievement in it all is also how it makes you think. Throughout your travels, you will find notes from those who have come before you and unravel the narrative of a universe that dies every 22 minutes. It's a story about hope, about belief in a force that makes us eternally suffer, and in its final moments reveals some truly thought-provoking revelations that remind us how great the human spirit can be. I've touched on exactly why I love the philosophy of this game, something you guys can check out in some of my philosophy videos if you're interested, but all I will say here is that The Outer Wilds manages to capture a sense of wonder and awe that few games do, despite the fact that I'm not actually in love with it. Which is even more impressive considering how small the team was that worked on this game as well. So while for me this title didn't hit as hard as it could have, due to the nitpicks I had regarding its design not being immersive simmy enough, and due to the fact that I played it when I was hoping for something more fast-paced in my life, I still think it's one of those games that everyone should play before they die. Because I think for most of you, unlike me, there is a journey on offer here that likely will have you thinking about it long after you've finished. With so many amazing fantasy and science fiction universes out there, it's practically impossible for any one human being to become immersed in all of them. And because of that, there will always be certain games and worlds that escape us, settings that we likely would love, but likely will never get the time to check out. For me, one of these worlds is Warhammer 40k, a backdrop I was always fascinated with, but never got the time to actually enjoy. That is, until our next game that everyone should play before they die. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. For those of you who haven't tried this hardcore traditional CRPG from Owlcat Games, on the surface it seems fairly archaic. Little voice acting, an isometric perspective, and menus that look more like Excel spreadsheets than most game UIs. But that's because what Rogue Trader lacks in pure presentation when compared to say some of its peers like Baldur's Gate 3, it makes up for with raw depth and quality. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that if Rogue Trader had the same level of budget for cutscenes, animation, and voice acting as Baldur's Gate 3, it would be the much better story. And on top of that, build variety and diversity is wide and interesting, allowing for tons of ways to play and a huge cast of characters that are all unique, many times bringing lots more conflict to the game's setting. And speaking of setting, it's exactly what elevates this title so much. Warhammer 40k is full of fascinating lore and ancient wars, politics, religion, slavery, and technological theocracies that battle between faith and reason. In Rogue Trader, you get to take the reins of, well, a rogue trader, a powerful individual granted the warrant of trade by the Emperor, allowing them to explore, conquer, and trade in uncharted regions of space beyond the direct control of the Imperium. The fantasy of essentially being a king that can decide the fates of entire planets and the aliens on them is so addictive, and the scale is breathtaking. In many other RPGs, finding a single gun might be a big moment for looting, but in Rogue Trader, you will be picking up hundreds of weapons and armor on each mission, quickly sending them back to your ship to trade with entire empires for tons and tons of goods. An RPG that feels like it is truly on a galactic scale, that gives you the opportunity to truly be a badass. And this feeling extends to combat too, where the turn-based tactics are fantastic. In fact, many fights, especially in the later half of the game, can be quite challenging, especially if you don't know what you're doing, where positioning and gear can become vital. The game is brutal too, with combat full of dismembering and blood, and a main storyline that doesn't hold any punches, showing you the worst that this universe has to offer and the horror that inflicts people every day here constantly. For example, on your massive capital ship, a constant side story throughout the narrative is about the lower rings of society. Thousands of people in the bowels of your machine who toil and slave away in the engine rooms where the heat can melt the skin clean off their bodies. Or cults that have sprung up, worshipping magical forces and fighting against enemies that can quite literally steal the bodies of their foes. There is just so much to love about the universe of Rogue Trader. After all, Warhammer 40k has been going on for decades now, and that means the setting is ripe with interesting things to explore. And as a sucker for world building and dark themes and sci-fi settings like this, I just couldn't get enough of Rogue Trader. It single-handedly made me fall in love with the setting, something other Warhammer games couldn't do, and I'm so thankful for that. Because usually when I see Warhammer, it has such a focus on, well, the war. But Rogue Trader is more methodical, more introspective, giving new people a better entry point into the universe, showing how brutal it can be without being nothing more than shooting and aliens. It's one of the best RPGs I've ever played, with over 100 hours of content, including riveting quests, lots of choice and consequence, extreme build variety, and a setting that is practically impossible not to fall utterly in love with once you begin to immerse yourself. I pray one day Owlcat will get the budget they need to make a Warhammer 40k RPG on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3, because I think that could be something really special that would make the IP explode. But in the meantime, I can't wait to try the upcoming Dark Heresy and Expanse games coming from Owlcat next. The story of Amicia and Hugo from Plague Tale is one of the most moving that I almost never see people talk about. Often, games like The Last of Us or God of War are brought up and described as amazing stories of father or mother-like figures and their child. But in my opinion, Plague Tale, and more specifically Requiem, is in many ways the better version of this. And because of that, I think it's a game that everyone should play before they die. First of all, the scenes in the game are breathtaking. Set in medieval France, Requiem sees you moving from bustling towns to scenic woodlands, all the way to alien underground hellscapes that inspire fear. And in each of these, you get the time to really explore and take it all in. More so than the first game, while the narrative is still primarily linear, there are many sections in the environment with open-ended levels, where you can choose to sneak past the guards or try to fight your way through everything. But just like the first game as well, combat here is just fine. For the most part, it feels pretty on rails, with a lot of different weapons or gadgets to use for sure, but none of them actually are all that fun compared to some of the competition. Where Requiem does shine though, and the reason I think everyone should play it, is the story. Amicia and Hugo's bond is unlike anything else I've seen in games, not only feeling raw and gritty, but passionate as well. A sister who will stop at nothing to defend her little brother, and a young boy stricken with an ailment that forces him to grow up quicker than any child should. There are scenes of horror and heroism alike, all centered around a family who has been torn apart and must rebuild the pieces. As much as I do enjoy the stories of, say, Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us or Kratos in God of War, there's just something about Amicia and Hugo that feels more real, more grounded, and more genuine. The voice acting, cinematography, and writing sells it as well, along with an awesome soundtrack that I think is also very underrated. It's one of those games that I'm not sure everyone who plays will love, but anyone should at least give it a shot because of how transformative the game can be if you're in the mood for it. So if you like heartwarming and tragic tales alike about honor, duty, and family, don't miss out on Plague Tale, especially Requiem. I've always been a sucker for games with huge twists in the narrative, titles that keep you on the edge of your seat the entire playthrough and produce moments that you never see coming, or main stories where the entire game is flipped on its head over and over again. Personally, I think everyone owes it to themselves to play a game like this at least once in their lives, something like, say, Doki Doki Literature Club, Me-Side, Undertale, or Soma. But in my opinion, out of all of these games that hold so many secrets, none do it better than Inscription. A title you should look up absolutely nothing about that I promise will be worth it in the end. In fact, fearing I would spoil too much even diving into what this game is about at all I can say is that it's based around a card game mechanic, one of my favorites in games. But even if you usually aren't into that genre, just trust me, don't listen to any reviews, don't watch any more gameplay, and don't even look up what this game is about at all. More than any other game on this list, it excels if you go in blind, and you will be happy you did when you reach certain moments that to this day are the most unexpected and crazy I've ever seen pulled off in a video game. Take my word for it and play Inscription before you die. I know this is a short section, but you'll thank me for it later. I love games with deep philosophical themes or cool ideas that make you think. And if you haven't noticed already, a lot of my picks for games everyone should play before they die center around this love. Whereas most people tend to like good gameplay first and foremost and hope for a good story secondarily, I'm the exact opposite. So for my next game everyone should play before they die, it's yet another psychological experience that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end, with countless hours of YouTube gaming essays to binge afterwards. Bioshock Infinite. Funnily enough, I'm actually not a fan of the first Bioshock game. I only played it after playing Prey, and sorry guys, I'm just gonna be completely honest, Prey is Bioshock 1, but better in literally every single way. So playing Bioshock 1 after it makes it a pretty sour experience. I like the ideas of Rapture and the cool twists, but the gameplay and design is painful, and the moment-to-moment storytelling just doesn't reach the heights, for me at least, of say Bioshock Infinite, even with the infamous twist. I know. Ironically though, Infinite is much more controversial than the first and second game it seems, being adored by some and hated by others. But as you can see, I fall squarely into the former. Even from the moment you step foot into the world of Columbia, a flying city in the sky, you will be taken aback by the scenery and iconography. On the surface, Columbia is pristine and beautiful, with happy children and families walking the streets and beautiful colors everywhere. But the more you dig into this facade, the more you realize the harsh edges around everywhere. The themes of slavery and abuse, of crime and punishment. From the ground up, the world and main story are meant to not only evoke different feelings in us, but ask philosophical questions with parallels to humanity as well. For example, while soaring through the sky to your next destination, you might come across posters depicting scenes of America overpowering the indigenous population, or religious texts and biblical adjacent verses screamed by villains mid-combat. And to top it all off, at the center of this narrative too is a very scientific approach to storytelling, touching on parallel universes, quantum entanglement, and an ending that will blow your mind and have you scrambling to pick up the pieces. Going back to this game now, some things surely feel a little dated, like the combat for instance, but I do think that still at its core, Bioshock Infinite tells a powerful and unique story that's practically begging to be played by all gamers out there. I can't even think of any other games that structure their story in quite the same way, and it's one of those titles that has some moments, specifically a quieter one with a guitar that I'm a sucker for, that will last with you for quite a long time. And now with the next Bioshock title presumably being worked on as of writing this video, it might be a good time to go back and remember what made this series so great in the first place. A series that rather than just being fun, makes you think too. Few stories and games have left quite as a profound effect on me as the twist and reveals from Pillars of Eternity 1. It's a title that's hard to get into initially, with complex combat and a slow start, but by the end, you will be sitting in a dark room contemplating the meaning of life in an existential crisis. And what's more fun than that? The game itself is a love letter of sorts to the great RPGs of old like Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, and Icewind Dale. With an isometric view and large party, you take gallivanting around in a big adventure. But in my opinion, it's even better than all those that came before, because Pillars of Eternity, especially the first game, in my opinion, just has it all. A riveting storyline with unexpected twists and turns, complex and rewarding combat that gets better and better the more time you spend with it, a rich and developed custom RPG system full of haunting quests, and maybe most important of all, a setting that elevates the series to one of the best RPGs I've ever played. And more than most universes and worlds in games, Pillars of Eternity is steeped in realistic considerations. Language and how people speak, religion, politics, wars, and philosophy have all had great effects on this world. And with each person you talk to or new location you discover, the setting opens up and becomes more and more deep. Some of the developers of this series are huge history buffs, and it shows, bringing socioeconomic and political backgrounds to the forefront in a world that feels genuine and alive because of it, especially when compared to a lot of other contemporary RPGs. For example, animancy, the study of soul energy and souls, is a hot topic of debate in the games, where you will get to see all sides of the argument, whether or not it's worth doing, and make decisions for large groups of people on what will happen in the world. The ideas behind it all are awesome too, concepts like the wheel, where souls that have died return to and are reborn again, and its implications on the wider world and religious fanatics. The concepts of the gods themselves too and their meddling in human affairs, and a personal favorite of mine, ancient civilizations that hold the secrets to the universe. It's a fantasy setting that almost feels science fiction in implementation, which allows for countless interesting explorations of the human condition and philosophy. And this setting is dark too, home to quests about torture, abuse, or babies torn from the womb before birth and twisted into horrific creatures. It's a callback to the role-playing games of old, but with an improved coat of paint and truly engaging writing that has a keen focus on making us think. Pillars of Eternity 1 is a massive and sprawling RPG in all the right ways, with huge build diversity, lots of quests, an interesting open world, and most of all, moments that stick with you long after you've played. You know, there's a specific moment near the very end of this story, a huge twist of sorts that I won't spoil here, but I will say is, in my opinion, maybe the coolest twist and reveal in a game I've ever seen. As much as I love Mass Effect, for example, the twist here is even more riveting. One that places everything before it in a new context and instantly elevates the world into something so much more philosophical and cunning than it even was before. And for that reason, everyone should at least give this game a shot before they die. And if my experience is anything to go by, keep pushing through. Because when I initially tried to play this game at least 3 times, in each of these playthroughs, I grew bored quickly and confused. The beginning of the game is the worst part, but it only gets better from there. Trust me, just keep pushing forward, keep leveling up, and you will eventually see why Pillars of Eternity and its universe is one of the best in games right now. And also, why we desperately need a Pillars of Eternity 3 with the budget of a Baldur's Gate 3. As someone that usually finds medieval settings and premises too mundane and lacking for full game playthroughs, the next pick on my list of titles everyone should play before they die might come as a surprise. A murder mystery set in the fictional 16th century Bavarian town of Tassing that puts us in the reigns of Andreas Mahler, a journeyman artist who must help a town and clergy remain sane with no voice acting or what most people would call gameplay to speak of. You see, Pentiment is a passion project from Josh Sawyer, the man behind many beloved RPGs like Fallout New Vegas. But while most of his other games have big budgets and teams, Pentiment is a labor of love created by only 13 individuals. This means usual staples like voice acting, detailed 3D animations, and hundreds of hours of content we know and love from Obsidian is absent. But in its place is something just as magical. Every day, you awaken your home in this small town and fraternize with the locals, going to church, eating around the dinner table, and tending to the animals on the farm. Each and every NPC has a believable personality and cadence that comes through even only in text. And accompanying each of them are meticulously drawn works of 16th century art and iconography that really sell you being involved in this time period. Similar to other titles on this list as well, there is a time element on offer here in Pentiment where every day you must decide on the things you will do and the objectives you want to accomplish, which makes decision making crucial to success. Earlier on in the story, a murder occurs, and in order to solve it and prevent Tassing from falling into utter ruin, you must meet and question all the locals, learn about what they do every day, and get immersed into the lives of everyday people hundreds of years ago. And you know, a lot of games do try to include historical elements or accuracy, because seeing things like that can be really interesting. But few pull it off in such a perfect way like Pentiment does, paying homage to the different languages of the time, religious customs, dinner routines, and politics. In fact, playing the game in many ways is a fantastic introduction to the time period, and shows just how great games can be at teaching history when done to this level of quality. It's one thing reading about how Bavaria would have been during this time period, but actually getting to play as someone living the life they would have back then kind of sells the whole illusion. For example, the rooms and houses are designed based on real historical towns, and every meal you have in-game has lore about the food, culture, and even how grace was said at the table. However, none of this would make Pentiment a game everyone should play if it didn't have something that made it fun. And here is where, in my personal opinion, the game really starts to take its hold. You see, Pentiment doesn't have much traditional gameplay like many other titles with shooting or melee buttons, but what it does have is fantastic writing. Simply sitting back and taking in the sights while you discuss the meaning of God with a local hermit is the type of thing that works with good writing. And the writing extends to the murder mystery here as well, which has many twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the final day. In fact, the main narrative of the game actually takes place over many years, so choices you make early on can have a drastic effect on the town and its people later, where if you accuse the wrong person, they will be hanged and the town changed for the worse. And even though the story of Pentiment is by no means as heroic or bombastic as most RPGs, it still somehow packs an even greater punch. The type where you will be invested in the lives of these people in this small town and grow a greater and greater appreciation for the time period on offer. And if I had to guess, this is exactly the type of experience Pentiment was aiming for. One that, while quite niche in a lot of ways, and on the surface at times even boring and slow, is a title I think everyone should play because it has so much to offer when you give it the time of day. While I know most people would pick a different Josh Sawyer project, like say Fallout New Vegas to put on this list, or another game that's similar like Disco Elysium, I just personally found Pentiment to be the more interesting between the three. I love Fallout New Vegas in certain ways, but I don't like the setting. And while Disco Elysium has some truly breathtaking moments, I do just think a lot of it's boring, too drab, and pessimistic.